Hello, my name is Michael Gabbianelli, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesdays. Today's episode is going to be about belaying and belay devices. So, before we get into the devices, let's talk about what is belaying. So, belaying is actually the process of managing the slack and stopping the rope to catch the climber when they fall. So every time we go climbing, we're going to be in a two-person system. That means we're going to have a climber and a belayer. And so the climber's job is to climb and manage their safety, while the belayer's job is to catch the climber if they fall. And to do that, they're going to employ a number of different devices and their harness and body weight to catch that climber. So today we're really going to kind of dive into some of the different styles of belay devices that you most commonly will see out there in the climbing world, and kind of talk about how they function, their pros and their cons. So as we get into this, the first type of device is not actually a device. You use a locking carabiner and what we call a Mansoor Hitch. And so this hitch is super special because it creates 3 points of contact on the rope, but can be easily manipulated. So again, we need to manage slack as we're belaying. So we need to be able to move rope through the device so that as the climber goes up, we keep that rope nice and tight on the climber. And this is a great belay strategy because it's really simple, right? We only have a carabiner and we have our rope where we can design that hitch, which will actually catch our climber. Some of the issues with this is that it does tend to twist your rope up, as well as can be somewhat difficult to manage. Also, sometimes you also will need a different belay technique in order to be safe with this. And so if you don't know how to use this properly, it's not as safe as another device that you do know how to use properly. So this is pretty much the oldest style of belay that you'll see out there these days. And it is a great skill to have, how to tie this hitch and use this hitch, so that if you ever do drop your belay device and you're a couple hundred feet off the ground, you can always get one of these locking carabiners and create your own belay device just using the rope and a locking carabiner. Great, so that's the Mansoor Hitch. Very cool hitch, very useful, and also a belay device or a belay hitch that we can use to catch our climber. Again, as time has progressed, so has technology in the climbing world. And so no longer do people normally use that Mansoor Hitch unless it's necessary or needed. So now what you'll see out there is also what we call an ATC, or air traffic controller. And this device, what it has is we have two different channels here for the ropes, depending on which side you're right or left-handed, as well as if we're doing a rappel. So this is also a rappel device, which is great. And again, it's going to be attached via a locking carabiner. And what this device does is it creates, again, 3 points of contact on that rope so that if the climber falls, the belayer's right there to catch them. These are amazingly effective when used properly. So there's no safety measures built into this device. It does need to be used properly for it to work. All belay devices are going to be a device and a locking carabiner. That's very important. So this is a screw lock. We already, as we talked about before, but it's really important that those are locking carabiners because you got a lot of rope moving through this device, and it's the safety aspect of the entire system, right? So that's what you're going to be catching your climber with. So this one's is supposed to be used from the bottom only. So you can see that it's just the device. This attaches to your harness, and you use this to belay that climber. So manage the slack and catch them when they fall. But when we climb, sometimes we're belaying from the top. So this device, unfortunately, doesn't really have that function. However, they do make what they call a guide mode, or every company kind of has its own. But as you notice, it's the same device, right? But on the top, you have an anchoring loop of metal. And that's where you're going to anchor that to the wall, and you're actually going to belay from the top by pulling down on this rope as the climber climbs up. Again, you're always going to have that locking carabiner where the rope passes through the device. So this is same as this, same style of device. It just has more functionality, again, because of this extra anchoring loop. So those are our plate style belay devices. There are many companies and styles out there on the market. That being said, they all work the same and they all have the same technique and function. They might look slightly different. They might have slightly different attributes. However, they're all going to be used the same way. So those are those plate style belay devices, more commonly known as an ATC, or air traffic controller. In the last few years, there have been a large development of what we call ABDs, which are assisted braking devices. And what these do is they give you an added layer of safety, because when you fall, they will actually brake. They can brake on their own. So as long as you have that, they can assist that brake. So this is the first assisted braking device that was developed. This is the Pretzel Gree, the original. And as you can see, it's a lot more complicated than the other devices and systems we've seen for belaying so far. So it's got a whole plate system, and it's got a cam device inside, which will actually cam forward and pinch the rope in this spot if the climber falls. So as long as the belayer is being attentive and belaying with the proper strategy, this device is great because it can also take some load off that belayer and kind of place it onto the device. Again, just like every other device, it creates 3 points of contact on the rope, which will stop and create enough friction to stop that rope from moving through the device. One thing you will also notice is that this device, since it automatic or assisted brake, so it pinches that rope, you need to disengage that camming device to lower your climber down. So we have a latch which will actually pull as we lower that climber. Again, some cons to this one is that the added safety layer is great, but again, as I've said, it's assisted braking device, not automatic. So you still need to be paying attention when using this device. Also, it's a lot more complex than the other devices, so there are more things that can fail on this device, as well as the use of this device can be a little bit more tricky for a new climber or a new belayer. So, Gree, this is the number one. They don't actually make this version anymore. So now they've upped the ante and got some newer devices. And so we have here's our Gree 2. And what the main difference is you can see it's a smaller device, which is nice because we don't have a lot of space when we're climbing. And the channels where the rope passes through are smaller so that it can be used on more diameters of rope. So this one had a very limited use. Only certain diameters could be used in this rope, or certain diameters of rope can be used in this device. While on this device, you have a larger variety of diameters that you can use. Again, you have your lever to release the camming device and lower that climber down. We have our locking carabiner always with our belay device. But the function of the device is the same, right? So you have this camming wheel that's going to pinch that rope when there's load put onto the strand. One thing with these devices that has been a common issue as well is when you pull this latch to lower people down, sometimes people would panic and hold that latch and it would lower people down really fast, which is not safe, obviously. So they actually have a whole nother style of device that they've come up with as well. That's called the Gree Plus. And this is our Gree Plus. Again, same size as that Gree 2. Will accommodate many diameters of rope. The difference is on this side here, you're going to notice a toggle switch in the middle of the device. And that's actually going to, this lever is actually what has an anti-panic feature. So if I am lowering a climber down and I pull that lever too hard, it's actually going to disengage and lock the device again. So you need to be very mindful of how you're lowering your climber. And if you're not, the device will actually manage the lowering on its own, which is pretty cool feature. But again, these are assisted braking devices. The belayer is, in the end, in control of this. And they're not automatic, and you do still need to pay attention. So really great devices. They add a great layer of safety for our climbers and take some of the strain off the belayer as they're belaying those climbers on their climbs. So very cool devices. Again, I only have the Gree-Grees, which are the Petzl version, but there are a lot of different styles out there, and you can get certain styles that are better for left and right-handed people. But with anything, just like any other kind of gear, you want to find what you're most comfortable with and what you're most familiar with using and what you are most trained on, right? So all these options are great options as long as they're being used properly. So just like anything, if they're not being done right, even with the super safe Gree-Gree Plus, mistakes can still happen. So it's very important to always know how to use these devices. Lastly, with our belay device, we'll notice that they get a lot of use, right? And there's a lot of rope passing through these channels and passing through your plates on your other device. And so it's always really important to monitor the wear of your device. And so on these, you're going to be looking at these channels and making sure they're not too worn down or sharp or have any burrs in there, because that will affect the safety of this device. So you got to make sure that it is in good operation. And you always want to double check your belay device before going climbing to make sure that it's still safe. Again, they get a lot of miles, a lot of rope passing through there. So this is an older device, just to show you. And you can see how shiny that inner track is. That means this device needs to be retired. So this is a great example of something that was once safe, but no longer can be used out there on the rock, because we are constantly doing our inspection of our gear, right? Same thing with my Gree-Gree original here. Old device, and if we take a look at this plate, look how worn down that is. That's gonna decrease and or negate the ability for this to work. So really want to make sure we're inspecting our devices very regularly and making sure that we're getting new devices as we wear through our old ones. Great. So that's a bit about belay devices. There are 101 of these out there on the market, and the best way to learn is to link up with a professional and find out what they would recommend and teach. And then that's where it's a great place to start. And again, make sure that you really know what you're doing when using these devices, because even the safest device is only as safe as the belayer operating it. So always make sure we're using our best practices, following our instructor and guides, our rules and regulations on how we're doing this, and make sure you're always paying attention when you're belaying. Great. So that's a little bit about belay devices. Hopefully you guys had some fun and learned a little bit today, and we'll see you guys next week.